Viewers, all those who insist that post the 2024 Lok Sabha, Assembly and elections, the Modi government has lost its mojo, its vim, its direction, will have to take back their words today. The NDA cabinet has cleared the mother of all political reforms, unarguably the biggest and without doubt bitterly contested in independent India's history. It is said that in the upcoming winter session of Parliament, the NDA is most likely to table a bill mooting simultaneous Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha elections. The reform, also popularly known as the One Nation, One Poll or ONOP, also envisages that urban body and panchayat polls will be held within the next 100 days of the simultaneous Lok and Vidhan Sabha elections. That means that there will be one election in two tiers. In the first tier, you will have the Lok Sabha and the Vidhan Sabha election, and in the second tier, within a 100-day interregnum, you will have the panchayat and the local body elections. The NDA cabinet unanimously accepted the report of the panel led by ex-President Ram Nath Kovind examining the feasibility of One Nation, One Poll. The Kovind panel sees merit in the move to hold ONOP, as it is called, as I've been telling you. Holding simultaneous polls will, quote, transform the electoral process and governance and optimize scarce resources, the report says. Among the advantages listed are that ONOP makes the electoral process easier for voters, synchronizing polls, and I will, viewers, list some of the recommendations to the right of your screens as I go through them. Synchronizing polls will also result in key reforms being less held up due to electoral concerns on account of frequent election cycles. Let's put those graphics up on the screen. There will also be reduced delays in projects due to the Model Code of Conduct impositions, will save precious taxpayer money. Politicians and officials can focus on long-term issues rather than frequent elections, which will result in better governance, faster economic growth, and therefore a more stable economy. Those points are there on your screens. This is why the Kovind panel has recommended ONOP. Not just that, a single round of elections, the panel says, will allow businesses and corporate firms to take decisions without fear of adverse policy changes. We've seen certain bills being passed through Parliament and then withdrawn, pulled back, or put on the ice. Some of them have economic implications. And when a bill is passed, a company in that sector might prepare, invest money to see the benefit or at some level or the other to protect its interests. But when that bill is pulled, when it is put on ice, all that investment goes down the tube. And this usually happens around election times. There's also cost saving to consider. Synchronizing elections would reduce high election costs and corruption, benefiting the economy. Lot of money changes hands. A lot of it is money that is undeclared. And of course, a lot of money goes into organizing elections. Less frequent elections would lower political polarization also. Hate speeches and rivalry constantly clashing at the hustings creates negativity. It also leads to a vendetta-oriented approach to politics. The panel has also reasoned that eventually holding elections at all three levels for the Lok Sabha, for state assemblies, for panchayats will, quote, avoid disruption of supply chains and production cycles due to migrant workers seeking leave of absence to cast their votes, unquote. The One Nation, One Election push will also prevent policy paralysis, says the Kovind committee, and do away with, quote, atmosphere of uncertainty, unquote. The government argues it's brought on by frequent elections. So I've taken you through some of the big ticket benefits that accrue when you adopt a one election, one India, one poll, one election, simultaneous election concept or policy. The high-profile panel said that 32 parties and prominent judicial figures, including former Supreme Court Chief Justices and High Court judges, had backed this measure. But unfortunately, the Congress and some of its partners, not all, some in the India bloc, haven't accepted it. Here is Mallikarjun Kharge, Congress chief. He says one nation, one election is only a BJP issue to divert attention. This is against the constitution. This is against democracy. This is against federalism. The country will never accept this, unquote. However, making ONOP a reality will require 2/3 of parliament to side with the BJP, or at least 2/3 of members in both houses of parliament who are present and voting. This is because the proposed system involves amending in at least 6 places the constitution. The BJP-led central government has a simple majority in both houses, but is short of that 2/3 mark by 52 votes in the Rajya Sabha and about 72 in the Lok Sabha. There you can see, viewers, what is required, 364. NDA is 54%. What is required is 67%. And of course, in the Rajya Sabha, I've already told you that that number is within range for the incumbent government. After this, after it goes through the 2 houses, this bill must be ratified by all states and union territories. Here, the BJP is better placed as of now. It's in power in 20 states. Ratification is required by about 14 states. So, as of now, it looks fairly comfortably placed to at least pass the state test. Now, for all the Congress party's objections, it seems to have forgotten that India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, who was a self-professed committed federalist, didn't have a problem with one nation, one poll. In fact, all centre and state elections from 52 right up till almost 1970 were held simultaneously. And that obviously means that today's Congress doesn't agree with the Congress of the past. It says this is against federalism, but let's not forget, it was Indira Gandhi's Congress party that dealt mortal blows to the federal structure, to state and centre relations by using Article 356 and other instrumentalities to sack governments at the state level. Governments that had been elected with majorities, overwhelming support. Let's open this up. Viewers, let's open this up. Let's get different stakeholders, lawyers who examine the constitutionality of this. We're going to speak to a former CEC. There are analysts. There's Dr. Ranganathan, who has talked about ONOP in the past. Let's open this up. Let me begin with Mr. Krishnamurthy, former CEC. Mr. Krishnamurthy, thank you for speaking to us. I just want to ask you, what do you make of ONOP? Do you think we should go ahead with it?
It is too simple a question that you are asking. Actually, I always held the view that administratively, financially, and from the point of view of management of the elections, it is a good idea to have the elections at one single point of time. There is no second opinion on that. But however, considering the constitutional provisions and the political challenges ahead, if it is possible to implement, well, it may be even desirable. But these challenges have to be met before they are implemented.
Now, what are the nature of these challenges, Mr. Krishnamurthy, that you're referring to?
First of all, the constitutional provision, the high-level committee has given certain suggestions. I'm not a constitutional expert. I'm not a constitutional lawyer either. This is a matter which I suppose ultimately it will go to the court. And the court may decide finally. Politically, the opposition parties seem to be questioning this proposal from the point of view of federal interest, saying that when you conduct the election simultaneously, the federal issues may be, or the regional issues or the state issues may not receive the attention at the time of the voting. Here again, in practical terms, we have found in many elections, the voters have voted for different parties for the central government and the state government. So even this objection may not be, really justified. But then in political terms, how the parties are going to face what issues they have, whether they will accept the proposal, is very difficult for me to say. As an administrator, yes, I agree that bunching the elections is desirable. But before that, I thought I'd also add, you see, in many states, the elections are held in 5 phases or 8 phases, as the case may be. Now, if you're going to have simultaneous election, we should also consider seriously to avoid multi-phased election in one state. Each state, ideally, it is better to have election in only one day, because it has not only administrative advantages, but also it avoids possible, movement of voters from one constituency to another to influence or to manipulate or impersonate and all that. So while you are considering the simultaneous election, we should also consider a single phase election in each state, although in some states it may be difficult, for example, Kashmir or for that matter, Bihar or UP. But our endeavor should be to reduce it to a single phase election in each state, even when you are holding simultaneous election. There is another point which I thought, okay, yeah, please.
Okay, no, well, let's come to that. Let's come to that. I just want to open this up. Dr. Ranganathan, Sanjay Hegde, and Kamru Chaudhary, let's bring them into this. Dr. Ranganathan, what do you make of this move? Many people are attributing, obviously, political motives. Some people are saying this is going to strike at the federal roots of our polity, this, that, the other. You've heard usually what is being said. I can elaborate on that if you want. But I think we've been here before. So I'd like to hear once again your views.
Good evening, Rahul, and good evening to my esteemed fellow panelists. They are the real experts here. I speak as a layman. But before I come to the thrust of my thesis, may I please kind of prod you to answer a small trivia, if I may. Rahul, what is common between GST, erecting tall flagpoles, bullet trains, ONOP, playing national anthem in cinema halls, Aadhaar, Land Acquisition Act, CAA, the new parliament building, the 3 farm laws, and one nation, one election?
Yeah, opposition to this by the Congress party and so on and so forth.
No, that comes secondary.
The Supreme Court.
They were all Congress ideas. Each and every one of them. Each and every one of these 10, 12 ideas were actually Congress ideas. They were implemented by the Congress, including the new parliament building was an idea. The 3 farm laws was in the constitution, GST, so on and so forth. I gave you a list. But as is the norm, because BJP is going to bring them, including possibly one nation, one election, the Congress is going to oppose this hammer and tongs. This is the tragedy of this country. When you are in power, you not only propose these ideas, you also implement this. Remember, it was until 1970 that we as a country were already implementing one nation, one election.
Yeah.
We had 4 or 5 general and state elections under the same one umbrella at the same time until Mrs. Indira Gandhi kind of, abrogated that. The point is there are pros and cons, and I'm not an expert, but at least to me, I'm undecided as yet Let me list out the pros and cons so that your viewers can make their own minds up. The pros are three. Number one, you will save an enormous amount of money when it comes to, for example, arranging and implementing and going forward with these elections. To give you an example, Lok Sabha, it is estimated that the central government spends to the tune of 6,000 crores. That's the official figure. Unofficial, it would be possibly 10 times that much. And every state government also spends the same amount. Every politician spends the same amount. So it totals to possibly more than 1 lakh crores that is spent possibly on state and central election. If they are held in one go, you're going to save enormous amount of money. Number two, you will save enormous amount of administrative costs, because the elections, to arrange for these elections, you need this entire administrative machinery, as the Honorable CEC also mentioned. And if it happens in one go, you are not going to replicate the same administrative officers going from one general election to state election, so on and so forth. And finally, you are going to save a lot of time, effort, money on the security forces that are implemented, that are kind of arranged in every state, going for every state, and then the Lok Sabha election. So these are the three advantages. The disadvantages that I can think of, not the federal structure, that's just hand waving, is the fact that we as a people, I'm not being patronizing, as very emotional people. We get, if some cataclysmic event happens or something happens that kind of brings the entire nation together to one aspect of news or whatever you may call it, an event, the entire voting machinery is going to be, or the voter is going to sway by it. I'll give you one example. The assassination of Mrs. Indira Gandhi. You had a newcomer brought in who had zero experience of administration, and he won 415 seats. And had you got state elections at the same time, Congress would have swept each and every state election purely on emotional reasons. So these are the pros and cons, but I as yet am undecided on this.
Undecided on this. Interesting. Look, there are some reasons, and I want to bring back Mr. Krishnamurthy. The marginalization of local issues, some people say national issues would overshadow regional concerns affecting smaller parties in states. There's obviously accountability. Regular elections allow voters, some people say, to constantly hold politicians to account, governments to account more frequently. Fixed tenures, which is something that spins out of this, and we can bring in Mr. Hegde, undermines the no confidence motion, altering democratic process. There is a homogenization of political discourse which may erode local representation and diversity of opinions also. So as Dr. Ranganathan was saying, that look, what if one particular big issue dominates, then everyone lemming-like will probably vote for that political party that espouses it, champions or benefits from it, or has raised expectations around it, and so on and so forth. So there is that problem. And there is obviously many people who also say there's this cost savings that are being talked about. You can't overemphasize that, because at the end of the day, people must speak, and our democracy needs to be vibrant, and there is no price to be paid to ensure that. So there are those views. But Mr. Hegde and Mr. Krishnamurthy are there. Mr. Hegde, where do you stand on this? Do you have a definitive position? If so, why?
Well, I have a definitive position. Basically, I think that this would be violative of the basic structure of the Constitution. The Supreme Court said long ago in Keshavananda Bharati, 13 judges, said that a parliamentary democracy is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. Now, what will happen with a one nation, one election would necessarily be a kind of presidential referendum. It would make the parliamentary system presidential. And I was looking at the amendments which are proposed. What happens if at the end of a Lok Sabha election, you still do not have a Lok Sabha that can continue in that particular combination? Say you have 240, 270, this, that, and the other. Supposing a parliament is dissolved before 5 years, what do? You will have another election only for the unexpired portion. Now, if a Lok Sabha were to be dissolved after 4 years, would you have a Lok Sabha election for 1 year? So it doesn't make sense to me. You may, through all this process, have on one date, one election for the entire nation, one time. But as a continuing process, I don't think it is possible because of the very nature of our polity. The second objection I have was eloquently put by Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia, who said, "Zinda kaum 5 saal intezar nahi karti." So here, where we have elections all over the country from different points of time, issues not only local but national issues also affect local elections, and there are constant pressure release valves. Imagine being stuck with an unrepresentative, unpopular government, and you can do nothing about it for 5 years. What you are doing is possibly inviting some kind of extra constitutional means, which will then come in. So I think that what we have currently gives us much more diversity, gives many more safety valves. And the third thing, far from saving money, you are inviting big money to bet big on one day. A set of what shall we say, businessmen, industrialists, whatever have you, conglomerates, can bet all their money on one side, and those that get left out, or those who think that they have lost out to money power, will then no longer have faith in the democratic process. I think this is too risky as a country. We are a subcontinental sized federation. Over concentration, over domination, over centralization will not work for us.
So, what I can't understand is we've had 5 elections, Mr. Krishnamurthy. Yeah, and it seems, I'll just come to you 1 second, Mr. Hegde. On this point, that look, all of this has all these problems and therefore we should tread with caution. But it appears, Mr. Krishnamurthy, that the founding fathers, they seem to have, the founding fathers of the Constitution, they seem to have been okay with this particular arrangement, this ONOP arrangement. Now, how do you square that with these arguments, Mr. Krishnamurthy? Because these are important arguments. There is precedence.
So, founding fathers did not give any pronouncement on whether the simultaneous elections are to be held or not. But when the Constitution was adopted, the first 3 general elections for both the states and the center took place simultaneously. That is a fact. But there is no constitutional opinion or constitutional ruling whether simultaneous elections will be held or not. One more thing I thought I must bring it to your notice. One of the suggestions of the high-level committee was little difficult for me to accept it, in the sense, they said if the state assemblies go through what is known as a vote of no confidence and the assembly has to be dissolved, the elections will have to be held even for a short period of 1 year, because the date prescribed for simultaneous election is to 2029 parliament elections. In which case, let us assume for argument's sake, a vote of no confidence is passed in a state sometime in 2027 or 28. And the election is, and the assembly, the government falls, new government comes into position. Then the vote of no confidence, if it is passed, the new government will assume office, and they may not hold the office for more than 1 year or 2 years. Mr. Kashyap, one of the members of the assembly, had suggested a solution to this. I feel more attracted by that suggestion. There must be a constructive vote of no confidence, in the sense, when the simultaneous election is adopted as a principle or as a policy, The state assemblies should not be and cannot be allowed to dissolve just on the basis of vote of no confidence, and elections are held immediately thereafter. That seems to be anachronistic, because you are asking for a single poll, simultaneous poll. Then how do you allow the state assemblies to be dissolved if the vote of no confidence is passed? The member has suggested that a vote of no confidence should be deemed as passed only if a new leader is elected and a new government is formed from the same house, so that the tenure of the house remains the same. This will ensure avoidance of frequent elections by dissolution of the houses after a vote of no confidence. This is also a worth consideration, in my opinion.
Yeah, unity kind of government.
You don't want to have too many elections when once you have accepted simultaneous election as a policy. So state assemblies should not be dissolved at drop of a hat by a vote of no confidence. It has to be accompanied by installation of a new government, a new leader to be elected to fill up the remaining tenure of the house.
Yeah, that means you basically get together a unity government, Sanjay Hegde. That's what it means. But you know, on that point of money, betting one side, betting on one election, etc., which democracy sees the maximum use of money when it goes to the polls?
Well,
Mr. Hegde, which democracy?
We do not have currently a strong two-party system.
Well, that doesn't matter.
In the US, you have, for instance, if you're referencing it, you have the Democrats and their PSCs, you have the Republicans and their PSCs, but that is essentially a presidential form. A parliamentary form is different because you have to take along everyone.
Not necessary.
Right? No,
not necessary. Not necessary.
Of course you have to, because that's, unless you carry the confidence of the House, and the House means the majority of the members of the House. Today we have a parliamentary system. And though it is become semi-presidential,
Mr. Hegde, even America has...
Just one minute. Though in practice it has become semi-presidential, especially after the anti-defection law, we still are a parliamentary democracy where everybody is represented. The vast areas of India all have their talking people in parliament. The second point I just wanted to correct Mr. Krishnamurthy. This part of dissolution for only 1 year and having another for only 1 year applies not only to state legislatures, but even to the Lok Sabha.
Yeah.
Even to the Lok Sabha.
That is a known fact. That's a known fact. But I think that actually helps, because if you have a unity government coming in, I think fundamentally you obviate this business of horse trading, this, resort politics that takes place, etc., etc. Yes. Very quickly, Dr. Ranganathan, I have to also bring in Mr. Kamru Chaudhary. Yes.
Excellent points made by both the Honorable former CEC and Mr. Hegde. Just to elaborate on that, I think this vote of no confidence is, to my mind, an excellent safety valve.
Yeah.
Especially when you have post-poll alliances that, to me, are unconstitutional. You're asking for votes, going hammer and tongs against each other, and after elections, you kind of form a government. So, and number two, I think Mr. Hegde also has a point about, it's when I forget the phrase he used, but when he talked about, course correction. You remember after the Lok Sabha polls, right now, many people, including all of us, are saying that for the Maharashtra polls, the BJP has done course correction. It's gone for khatakat schemes. So yes, it is a fact that there is a fallback system that has come on its own, evolved, whereby a party learns from one election and implements it to the other, and vice versa.
Okay, so let me just bring in Mr. Chaudhary. Mr. Chaudhary, the point is that, look, the Congress seems to be again on a side of a divide where it actually argued from in the past. We've had 5 general elections. And the reason the cycle was broken was because Indira Gandhi used, many people say, unconstitutional means, etc., to bring down state governments. If it was anyone who destroyed the center-state relationship, it was her. So, I mean, if it was okay for Nehru and the people of India under Nehru, why can't it be okay for Indians under Modi?
Yeah, that's the point, It was advantage Jawaharlal Nehru in 1951 to 1967. And so it cannot be an advantage to Narendra Modi once again in this 2029 elections. Why I say this, I listed a number of reasons why one nation, one election destroys the basis of the federal structure of our constitution. And the states, the potential for national regional conflicts is here. India, Rahul, is a diverse country and regional parties play a significant role in many states. Holding simultaneous elections may lead to regional voices to be subjugated, and the national issues will find premise over the regional issues, wherein it will always be the advantage of the pseudo-national parties that are ruling the country right now over centralization of the political power. Then you have got the most important argument is that frequent elections will always hold these netas accountable to the general public. That is the most important reason why frequent elections need to be there in the country. The division of power between the national parties and the state parties need to be defined within the Indian constitution. Otherwise, going for a bipolar polity out here.
Okay.
There is no need for a multi-party democracy out here or elections to be held every year. But I don't understand the logic that is given out here is that the elections will reduce the cost of the on the exchequer. I doubt it, because as the panelists have argued out here, that whatever it may be, you will hold an election for 1 year of the remaining part of the government out here. Then how does it reduce the cost of the elections? You need to conduct the elections. That's the constitutional mandate. More importantly, the campaign polarization that will be there once the the one nation, one election will be there. And why I say this, a more polarized campaign movement can be there. We know in 2019 how Pulwama decided the fate of the 2019 results. We as an Indian, we need to get into the bottom and the crux of the problem that is facing India right now.
So hang on, you have to make up your mind. Mr. Chaudhary, no, I agree with you. There are some points that you make, legitimate points. Others have also voiced them, etc., etc. But on this regional party business, viewers, a large number of regional parties, in fact, within the India bloc, the Samajwadi Party has leapt across and said, no, we are for ONOP. Now, that is a significantly big regional party, 37 MPs in today's Lok Sabha, viewers. That wouldn't be sort of playing with its fortunes, would it? So,
no,
hang on. Then there are many examples where state and Lok Sabha elections have taken place simultaneously and reflected different outcomes. And then, viewers, when we talk about, oh, look, that was Nehru and this is Modi, we were being told that in any case, Mr. Modi was going to win because the elections were rigged. That the playing field is not level. This is despite having these multi-tiered elections at every level. So viewers,
the question out here
look,
is the level playing
these three
field.
examples we need to look at closely. Are we being facetious when we say, oh, we are constricting choice because, we are obviously playing with people's sentiments by expecting them to differentiate at the state level and the central level? Well, there are many states that actually go to the elections, sometimes even within 4 months of the general election, and on that day, there are at least 3 or 4 states that elect their various state legislatures, and we see enough variance there, viewers. Money, they say money will wag the election. People will bet big on one outcome. Well, in America, viewers, I'm not talking about whether it's a presidential election or this election, because there are elections that take place also halfway through a presidential term, and that's the Congress. But just parking that aside, by that logic, England, by that logic, UK, by that logic, 3 or 4 other European top democracies would also then want fragmented elections, provincial elections at different times, and the central parliamentary election at different points. 30 seconds, Dr. Ranganathan, since you're raising your hand, I want to move on after that. Important story. Yeah.
Just on a lighter note, I worry for my good friend's future, Mr. Kamruji, because he said for 15 years Nehru was wrong and destroyed the constitution.
Well, in a manner of speaking, he said that he got back because of this sort of didgeridoo of ONOP.